morning. Will India and Pakistan go to war is the issue that I will address in my video today. Now this has two elements. One is, will India start a war? And the second is, will Pakistan do that? Separate issues, so I will talk of them separately. Now as far as India is concerned, India will not start a hot war, and India will neither do pretense of a hot war. However, the television studio wars will continue and perhaps intensify, and on the line of control, we are aware that small arms firing on both sides, it has intensified, and the reports say that India will end the ceasefire. If that happens, then the artillery will open on both sides. Consequence of that will be that the civilians on both sides will suffer. There will be more civilian casualties, and on both sides they will not be able to attend to their work in the fields which are close to the line of control. Now coming to the main point, why I say that India will not start a hot war. Because today India faces 5-front challenge, which is unprecedented, and this has come about because of India's action of 5th August 2019 in Jammu and Kashmir, where it revoked 370 and 35A. As a consequence of that, China regularly and repeatedly gave assurance to Pakistan that it will support Pakistan's sovereignty. That is saying a lot, and because of that, these 5 fronts have opened up. Now what are they? First is the line of actual control with China. I will explain these in a detail in a while. The second one is the critical need for the Indian Army especially to maintain the sanctity of its logistics lifeline in the hinterland. The third is the actual war, the traditional war between India and Pakistan that will happen. The fourth is something new, a whole of nation or whole of India war that India will have to contend with. And the fifth one, equally important, is the need for regular operational support logistics. Simplified, this means a regular supply of spares, critical assemblies and ammunition. Now let me just explain these five in a little more detail. See, what will happen is that because China is committed to supporting Pakistan's sovereignty, PLA grey zone activities will heighten up on the line of actual control, because of which it will be impossible for the Indian military to move its assets, whichever are there on the China front, to the war at the Pakistan front. So those limited assets will get hugely divided here. Second, the logistic lifeline. Let's be very clear, if there is a war, we cannot count on the Kashmiris, which have been betrayed, which have been alienated by India over the years. So those lifelines will need a heavy protection, not only Rashtriya rifles, perhaps even regular army units will have to be employed there. Third is the actual war. Now, our experience of the wars that India has fought with Pakistan, all the wars, is that in the first war, which is the war of Kashmir, the military line was created on 1st of January 49. That military line still remains. Although the name is changed, it's called line of control. What this means is, in military syntax, that at the operational level of war, where a war outcome is determined, the two militaries are matched. They are peer competitors. If this is the case, which it is, it means that there will be tactical fights between the two militaries, and tactical fights are about attrition. Numbers matter. Now think of the Indian Air Force, where the Indian Air Force Chief, Air Chief Marshal A.P. Singh, has repeatedly said that I am short of platforms. I am only referring to the platforms. I am not even talking about other essentials which the Air Force lacks today. Now, he has said, I'm short of platforms. Think of it, so many of its platform he will not be able to use because they have to be kept for the China front, and he'll have very little platforms to use against Pakistan. So there is trouble. Now, as far as the whole of nation war I said is concerned, this is something new. We have seen cyber attacks which have been attributed to the Chinese, although when these attacks happen, they are non-attributable. China can always say that it is not responsible. So as far as cyber is concerned, cyber attacks are concerned, or non-kinetic anti-space capabilities are concerned, China has huge capabilities. Then it has the capability to cut off the internet that comes into India. Now, its capabilities are so huge that today, if you see the reforms of last year, the reform of April 2024, because the PLA is working to have a deterrence against its main adversary, US military, it did reforms and it created two new arms. And those two new arms are Aerospace Force and Cyberspace Force. And that is meant for whole of nation approach. That means war at the strategic level. So nobody has fought and nobody has seen a cyber war. What has been seen are the cyber attacks. Cyber war will be something entirely different. The world has not seen, because it will need a lot of management at a huge level. In other words, if this was to happen, not only PLA would be supporting its key ally, the Pakistan military, it will also derive operational experience which will give it first user advantage over its key adversary, that is the US military. Now, coming to the last front that I spoke about, the operational logistics. They are operational logistics, they are absolutely critical. Please understand that in 2021, news came that lot of Pakistan military representatives, they now have been embedded in their embassy in China. In other words, the numbers were increased and their sole role has been or is to ensure that there is a regular supply of ammunition, of spares, of critical assemblies. In other words, recall Kargil. When Kargil happened, General Musharraf was there in China asking them for spares, asking for various things. Now that situation doesn't exist for Pakistan. It will have a regular supply, and as I said, this is a war of attrition. Numbers will matter. How much supplies they are getting, how quick they are getting, all this will matter. On the other hand, please recall Kargil. The Indian situation was so dire that there were numerous reports that the Indian bureaucrats, they were carrying their suitcases full of dollars, moving around the world trying to get spares and ammunition for the Indian military to fight. So this is a formidable thing which India faces, so therefore it will not get into a hot war at all. Coming to the pretense of war. You see, Modi government has started what no other government or prime minister did in the past. That is a pretense of war. And when I say that, what I mean is the so-called 2016 so-called surgical strike, and especially the 2019 Balakot air attacks. They were not military operations at all. That was pretense of a war for a political objective of the ruling party. Now that will not happen this time, because already there have reports come up that the Pakistan military will not take any chances. It is on heightened alert. Their air force, all their radars, their air defense equipment, everything is on high alert. And even as far as the Pakistan army is concerned, their forces are moving to the front. So they're not taking any chances. In other words, this thing cannot be repeated, because if it is repeated, escalation is certain. And for escalation, as I said, India is not prepared for a hot war. So this is as far as war is concerned from the Indian perspective. because after all the worry is that India will start a war. Now let's see the Pakistan side. As far as Pakistan is concerned, they don't have to start a war except in the case of Indus Water Treaty. India has suspended this Indus Water Treaty, and Pakistan has made it very clear that if the water to Pakistan is reduced or redirected, that will be an act of war as far as Pakistan is concerned, and it will retaliate. And mind you, India needs to take this seriously. They are saying that this will be an act of war because it will not be what the Indian Air Force did during the Balakot air attack. Please recall at that time the Pakistanis did Operation Swift Retort. That same evening, Indian Air Force conceded that what they did was an act of war, but nothing further was done. This will not be the case of Pakistan. So when I look at the overall scenario, I do not see possibility of a war at all. However, heightened activities, tensions, television talk, shouting, screaming will continue. Thank you.